Philip A. Bishop, Doctor of Education, Physical Education, University of Georgia. Dr. Bishop is a tenured professor of exercise science at the University of Alabama. From 1993 to 2000, he worked as a visiting scientist at the Johnson Space Center with the Exercise Countermeasures Project. He has published many reports in the areas of physiology of clothing, thermal physiology, and performance. Dr. Bishop believes that the evidence for God is plainly seen in the human body. Quote, "Your eyes, your ears, your heart, each of these together with their intricate function should inspire awe. The heart of man from a functional viewpoint is a miracle of performance. Through a complex nervous and hormonal feedback regulation system, the heart and circulatory system maintain the exactly correct rate and output to supply the correct blood flow for both the marathoner and the couch potato. The parts of you that are functioning at any particular time receive a share of blood in proportion to their need, and those that are resting quietly receive their carefully metered due. Your nervous system, too, is marvelously complex. It has the ability to communicate the feel of pain resulting from intense pressure, yet adapts appropriately to the pressure of sitting or standing without distracting neural traffic. A nervous system just like yours precisely controls the muscles of the concert pianist playing Chopin, the baseball slugger making contact with a 98-mile-per-hour fastball, and the gymnast performing a triple somersault to a precise landing. Your red blood cells, which incidentally happen to be the ideal shape for transporting oxygen, are manufactured and destroyed at an incredible rate. Approximately 10 million red blood cells are made every hour, and an equal number destroyed. If either supply or destruction becomes out of synchrony by as little as 1%, before long your life ends due to anemia or polycythemia, which is to say, your blood gets so thin that oxygen transport is insufficient, or it gets so thick that it can no longer circulate. Blood clotting is similarly complex, requiring coordinated function of at least 11 chemical factors. Should blood clot too readily, or should clots which are formed fail to dissolve, you die. Should it clot too slowly, again, the result is death. Our body contains hundreds of complex feedback loops whose precision and reliability are vital to life. Even the most talented design engineer would be reluctant to undertake such a complicated project. 2. The margin for error isn't very great. Without knowing it, we tread a very narrow path, where the smallest error produces death. Fortunately, the vast majority of the time, we are not penalized for our ignorance. Our very existence seems more an affront to a survival of the fittest evolutionary scenario. Man's unimpressive hair covering would have restricted early man to the warmest climes. Likewise, the man's kidneys are relatively poor water conservers compared to most animals, suggesting man was restricted to a warm and wet environment. Man's claws are unimpressive, and his running speed could hardly serve as an effective escape mechanism. Man's teeth aren't especially good at capturing or killing game. Relative to most animals, man's digestive ability is inefficient. Even man's greatest ability, his intellect, would not have done that earliest man a great deal of good in the harshest of survival conditions. How much good would your intellect do you in a tropical wilderness without food, clothing, shelter, and specific training in survival? If survival of the fittest were the rule of the earliest days of man, how did we ever make it? How is it that we are more impressed with the violin than with Stradivarius himself? How can we marvel at physiology, acknowledge its complexity, and assume we are the products of random chance? William Paley once put forth the illustration that if we were walking along and suddenly came upon a watch, we would assume that indeed there was a watchmaker. We seem perfectly willing to examine our form and function, which is eminently more complex than a timepiece, and yet assume we have no creator. Our basic failure seems to have much in common with the biblical account of Adam's fall in Eden. Adam was tempted to become like gods. Adam premised his elevation to God status on indulging in the fruit. Modern Adam premises his elevation to the highest status by indulging in self-assurance that God is non-existent. To acknowledge that man was created is to acknowledge the existence at some point of a being higher than man, and for some Adams that is simply too humbling. After several years of spending full-time studying the human body, I have to agree with the words recorded in the holy writings of the Jews and Christians. For God dost form my inward parts. God didst weave me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to God, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Psalm 139, verses 13 and 14. End quote. Phillip Bishop, Evidence of God in Human Physiology, www.leaderu.com.